Keep in mind, there's no requirement for how exactly you should use a blog. The important thing is you understand the strengths and weaknesses and opportunities that you can get from the blog, and then you start to leverage it from that standpoint.
You're an entrepreneur, and you make vital decisions that hopefully blossom into a business. You're the savvy, out-of-the-box risk taker who believes wholeheartedly in the process of innovation. Innovation that will change the world. This is CEO Chat with Gresham Harkless, and you're about to embark on a journey through the awesome world of business. Gresham is the epitome of drive and desire as he works to help support small businesses and entrepreneurship. And you're about to learn from this entrepreneur how you can improve your odds of success in the business world. Welcoming the host of CEO Chat, here's Gresham Harkless.
Hello. This is Gresham Harkless from the CEO Chat podcast powered by CBNation.co and Blue 16 Media, your choice for all your web design, SEO, and digital marketing needs. This is talk number 10 in the series that will become the You Are a Media Company course, and this is the third of 4 that I will speak specifically about the blog and why it's important. So last chat we spoke about the best practices and tips for blogging. I gave you 16 tips. In this chat, I will focus on just some things you should keep in mind about blogs and why it's important. And just like every chat that I've started with the You Are a Media Company course, I'm going to start you out with a definition so you get a baseline of exactly what a blog specifically is. So a blog, shortening of web blog, is an online journal or informational website displaying information in the reverse chronological order, with the latest posts appearing first. It is a platform where a writer or even a group of writers share their views on an individual subject. Now, this is very, very important, and I go as far to say, and to kind of simplify it even more, to say a blog is simply the creation of digital content. The reason I say that is because, as you'll see in a future chat, I talk a lot about how a lot of these different social networks, the website, and everything are kind of merging over and blending over, and there's more opportunity to blog on different platforms than the traditional blog where you're doing it specifically on your website. But I'm going to talk a little bit more about the traditional blog and focus a little bit more on that. But keep in mind that I usually sometimes will use the definition of it simply being the creation of digital content. So I wanted to give you a scenario for like the average small to medium sized business owner. You might be a dentist and you might have a team of employees that you manage, and you do all the day-to-day behind the scenes type work, and you've heard from somebody that you need to incorporate blogging. You're not really sure why or how to do that. What I want to do is just give you some ideas and some insight into why that's important, some of the things that you should try to keep in mind. So as a dentist, not only while you're working and performing surgery and performing procedures and doing cleanings and all those things, you're still able to kind of tap in and to build upon this 24/7 opportunity, like the website and digital marketing, and specifically for this chat, the blog. So I wanted to give you 10 things to kind of keep in mind when you're thinking about the blog. And the very first thing, a blog is what you make of it. There's no requirement for how you have to use it and leverage your blog. I think often you definitely want to leverage best practices. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about one of the best ways that I believe that you should use a blog. But I want you to keep in mind that there is not necessarily one set way you have to use a blog. Again, holding true to the definition that I gave a little bit earlier, that a blog is simply the publishing of digital content. Keep in mind that, again, you're creating content for a very specific purpose. And I usually say this over and over again. You heard it in the first few chats. The first You Are a Media Company chats that I talked about, how important the strategy and the focus and the goals are to figure out exactly what it is that you want to do, because you can really think out of the box as far as creating a strategy, creating content, and creating maybe even a way in which you can drive clients in a way that your competitors and even maybe the most heralded digital marketers have not even thought of. So you really have to start thinking outside the box. So I think when you simplify the definition of that, it makes it a lot simpler to figure out what type of content that you want to create. So keep in mind that as the dentist, you might create content that is specifically questions that your clients and customers have, or maybe it's just a kind of behind the scenes so people can get to know a little bit more about the people that are going to be working with them. They're going to be cleaning their teeth. They're going to be engaging with them, so they know that, hey, this person has a dog. Hey, this person doesn't like anchovies on their pizza. Whatever it is that kind of humanizes what it is that you're about to do, it makes it a more enjoyable experience for the person that's coming there, and maybe less of a scary experience, especially for those people that might be afraid of the dentist, or children that might be afraid of that. So keep in mind, there's no requirement for how exactly you should use a blog. The important thing is you understand the strengths and weaknesses and opportunities that you can get from the blog, and then you start to leverage it from that standpoint. Number 2, blogs are really good for SEO. As you have probably heard, and as I'll talk about in the next point, WordPress is definitely a great way to build and create a blog. And I talked about it in the chat that was specifically dedicated to WordPress and blogs, and how important that is. But keep in mind that blogs basically will attract what I will talk about later on in future chats as the Google spiders to your site. And the idea is that one of the ways to attract people to your site and attract those spiders to your site is to have and create content on a regular basis. And some people will think that means, well, you have to change your About Us page over and over again. No, in reality, what you can do is you can create a blog and you have constantly changing content. So as long as you have new content and fresh content that you're adding to your site, that's going to be a way that you can attract spiders. When you're attracting Google spiders, what they're doing is they're combing through your website. They're crawling your website for the information that's there. And once they're there, then that's potentially, there's a lot more involved in it, but it is a way in which you can kind of potentially increase your activity overall, because as I'll touch on in a future chat about SEO specifically, the name of the game is really to try to have a more attractive website to these search engines than your competitors for those specific keywords. So you want to try to keep that in mind and stay true to that. But keep in mind, blogs are really good for SEO because when you have that consistent content that's changing, that's going to attract those spiders. It's going to attract people to go to your website, to share your content and to interact with your content, engage and write and write comments and things like that. So it's a great way for you to kind of increase your overall search engine rankings. Number 3, WordPress is a great platform for blogging, but it is not the only one. And I touched on this a little bit earlier. WordPress is a way for you to develop and create a blog in a blogging site, but it is definitely not the only way that you could do it. Most blogging platforms, or most websites, have a blogging platform built in, and it allows you to add that on. One best practice that I'll touch on again is just that you want to 9 times out of 10 probably build your blog connected to your website. You don't want to have them be 2 separate entities, again, because blogging is so big for SEO. You want to be able to drive that content to your site, and if your blog and website are separated, that's not going to do that. So you want to, unless you're doing it from a strategic standpoint, you want to try to keep that in mind. So WordPress is a great platform to create a blog, but it's definitely not the only one in which you can do that. Also, I'll touch on it a little bit later in future chats, but also keep in mind that because I define blogging as the creation of digital content, I also would argue that there's social media sites where you can leverage blogging. Now, again, they're not driving traffic to your website, I guess, as close as possible. They are kind of indirectly doing that, but they're not doing it as directly as if you had a blog built in within your domain on your website. But you can also use the quote unquote blogging platforms that are built within social media sites. So perfect example is LinkedIn. LinkedIn has what is essentially, I see it as a blogging platform. It's been redefined and it's had, multiple names, but the idea is that you can go and create long form content on LinkedIn. When I say long form, they're not just social media updates and short social media updates that are less than 180 characters or 360 characters. If you have 1,000 word blog post or 1,000 character blog post, you can post that on and connect it to your LinkedIn. So it has inherently within it a blogging platform. So that's why I usually say the creation of digital content, because LinkedIn has redefined it over and over again. So it's become multiple things, but keep in mind, or it's had multiple names, I should say, but keep in mind, it's the same kind of creation of digital content. So it's important to kind of keep that in mind. Now, number 4 is that it helps you drive traffic to your blog and to your website. As I mentioned earlier, you want to, in most cases, have your blog built into your website. You don't want to have them separately, because the idea for most people is to drive traffic to your website for usually a very specific purpose. And I'll touch on how you can do that as well too. But keep in mind that while you're driving traffic to your blog or website, when you're creating these content, you might be sharing it out to people so that they can share it out to their audience. You might be featuring people on your blog post, which is something that we definitely do with CEO Blog Nation when we have our roundup interviews, where we feature entrepreneurs and business owners and they share to their audiences, and it goes viral from that standpoint, and it's specifically organic growth. But you really want to try to drive traffic to your blog and website. But you also want to keep in mind why you're doing that and make sure that when that traffic comes, you're prepared for that. So those are just some of the kind of things that you want to try to keep in mind when you're thinking about why it's important to do blogging and to commit to regularly creating that content. Next thing, you have an opportunity to convert traffic into leads. So you get the person to come to your website. You're the dentist. You get the person to come to your website because you wrote a blog post on, maybe it's how to prevent cavities. And somebody goes and they see that blog post maybe on LinkedIn, maybe they see it on Facebook, and they go to your website and they read the blog post and they interact with your blog post. But that's all they do. Here's your opportunity as a business owner to really leverage that traffic that's coming to your website. Now, you can do that in a lot of different ways. You have pop-ups, you have maybe you have a drop down at the very top of the site. There's a lot of different ways, but usually what you want to do is you want to try to get that visitor that came to your website and provide them a compelling offer for them to take action. And when they take action, you want to try to get their contact information. And this is very somewhat old school, but you typically want to get their name, email address, and their phone number, because those things are consistent usually across different platforms. So you can ask them for their Instagram handle if you want, but keep in mind that if Instagram was to go belly up and they would no longer exist or not be a relevant social media site, and that person that visited your website no longer uses Instagram, there's a chance that you might have lost that customer forever. But if you have their name, email address, and their phone number, traditionally, not for everybody, of course, but usually that will be consistent regardless of what the new social media site is or what the cool social media site is or where they're spending their time. Because keep in mind that someone that's using Snapchat today, that's a teenager, if you want to get those clients or get those customers to basically have a lifetime relationship with you, they may not be using Snapchat 20 years from now, and Snapchat still might be a relevant social media site, or Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever. Keep that in mind, that usually you want to try to get your name, email address, and phone number if at all possible. So when people go to your website, you're looking at that how to prevent cavity blog post, and then all of a sudden while you're scrolling down, you go down 20% to the website, and then the next thing you see is that there's a pop-up, and there's a pop-up and says save 20% off your first doctor visit, or maybe it's download our healthy, active, and fit ebook to figure out how exactly to be healthy and active and fit ebook. So you want to try to keep that in mind as a way for you to try to convert and take those people that are visiting your website and convert them into leads and have those leads potentially become clients and customers. Because when they sign up, maybe they're signing up for your email list. When they sign up for your email list, maybe you're sending them your regular emails, or maybe you have a whole entire drip campaign that gives them loads and loads of content so that they potentially will set up a visit with you. Maybe within that drip campaign, you have and give them an offer that you would only be able to get through that drip campaign. Maybe it's the 4th or 5th email that comes through. So again, you're thinking about all these things and how you can potentially convert that person that just came to visit your website because they wanted and were searching for how to prevent cavities into what is now a client that will go to your dental practice, not this year, but for the next 10 years, and will have and get married and have children, and they will also come to your dental practice. So this is kind of like the long-term perspective that you want to try to take when you're blogging and creating that content. But at the heart of it, you just want to make sure that you're adding and providing a lot of value. Now, number 6, blogging can help out with your authority positioning. I touched a little bit on LinkedIn and how important that is. That's definitely, and still consistently, I would say, is your professional Facebook. That's how I always used to define it. But keep in mind, from a brand positioning standpoint, you can create content on LinkedIn, and that can build you up as an authority. And when you're building yourself up as an authority, what happens is you get the opportunity to maybe be the go-to person for whatever your niche is. So if your niche is as a personal trainer, moms over the age of 35 that have had 1.5 kids, that's your niche. You can be the go-to person because you're the personal trainer that helps moms that have had 1 or more kids get back to the shape they were before they had children. Maybe it's something like that. Maybe it's that specific, that much of a niche that you try to focus on. And then you're going to be the go-to person for that. So every time somebody has 1 or maybe more than 1 child, they want to try to get back to how they were before as far as size, as far as health and in their actual size and healthy status. They want to get back to how they were before. So you are the person they go to, and everybody knows you're the person to go to. So how do you build that? How do you create that authority? A lot of people will say, you should write a book, and that's definitely a phenomenal way to do that. If you have that as a title, then that's a slam dunk way that you can do that. But even if you have a book, or even if you don't have a book, keep in mind that blogging is a really great way to build your authority within that niche that you want to build it in. And you're thinking about and thinking first and foremost about the moms that have the 1.5 kids or 1.5 kids. So you really want to try to keep that in mind, because you're going to create content for them. And maybe you're not necessarily getting them, after they have the child. Maybe your perspective and your entire strategy is all about creating content for them while they're pregnant with their first child, or maybe they're pregnant with their second child. So maybe instead of just saying, hey, you just had a baby, how do you get back to your pre-baby weight? The idea is now that you're going to give them tips and information on things that they should eat while they have and are pregnant. Maybe when they're 7 months along or 5 months along, this is recipes and things that you want to try to incorporate and eat, so that when you have your son or daughter, you want to be able to try to get back to your weight. And these dishes or these meals are going to be able to help you do that. So you're the go-to person for that, because not only have you been thinking about them after they had the child, you're thinking about them all throughout the pregnancy. And that's huge, because what you're developing is a long-term relationship with the clients. And maybe that's your initial niche and your initial focus, but maybe you also understand that, hey, maybe I want to start a nutrition line related to kids that are a certain age group. So now all of a sudden, those moms that have the children, they also have a associated nutrition line that allows the babies that they just had, that become toddlers, that become, elementary school age children, and so on and so forth, now have healthy options, because they're listening to the same person that helped them when the child was actually within the womb when the mother was pregnant. So these are like long-term things you want to be thinking of, but really a lot of that starts with creating content and creating a blog post. So you really want to try to keep that in mind, that you position yourself as an authority, you figure out what that niche is, and you create content related to that so that you are the go-to person, not someone else. You are the go-to person because you've created so much content and you've shown them exactly what dishes you should eat in order to be successful. You've shown and had testimonials from people that have listened to you and had a child and also executed upon that quote unquote strategy that you had and are now living a healthier and happier life. So people want to emulate that and they'll look to you as an expert because you've been able to do that. So authority position is a huge benefit of blogging. Number 7, driving long-term results. A lot of times people, small business owners, will create a blog post and they'll automatically think people will be breaking down the door to get to them. Same exact concept with the website, that a lot of times people don't look at it as a way to drive long-term results, but you really should. You should look at it as a way for you to create content. And by creating content, you're not necessarily bringing people in the door today, but you might be bringing them in a year from now. You might be bringing them in 2 years from now or 3 years from now, or you might be creating a lifetime relationship where you're working with this person for the next 10, 20, 30, 50, 100 years, because not only are you working with them, you're working with their children and so on and so forth. And those are, in a perfect case and example, is a financial planner, because if you work with an adult, that adult has children. When they have children, then their children have 529s and all these things to get them ready for college. And the next thing you know, when they graduate, then they're working with the same financial planner. So that's creating lifetime relationships and generational relationships. So you really want to have that same perspective when you're thinking about creating these blog posts, because what you're trying to do is provide a tremendous amount of value. And in providing a tremendous amount of value, you're positioning yourself, as I mentioned at number 6, as the go-to person, the authority. And when you're the authority, you're going to build long-term relationships, because people are going to want to go back to you. They're going to tell all their friends and their family that, hey, I want to go to this person because this person is the absolute best person that there is out there. This guy that owns this soccer camp is the best person to go to because he's created so much content that I know how to train. And because I know how to train, I'm going to continue to go back to his summer soccer camp for that specific reason. So the idea is you really want to think about that as far as driving long-term results. You really want to think about every blog post that you're creating. And this is not to build it into something that is insurmountable or has to be perfect, but you really want to have that perspective, because especially related to SEO, it's definitely a long-term focus. So you really want to try and have that perspective about creating and generating long-term results. Number 8, it is a great way to interact with clients. And I touched a little bit on this, but like I mentioned, when you have clients and customers, when you are providing a certain service or even a product to your potential clients and your potential customers, you want to make sure that you are trying to be as efficient as possible. One of the best ways that I've been able to do this is whenever I get a question from a client, I will try to create a blog post from it. The reason for it is not only can I answer that client's question, I'm hoping to answer other clients' question. Now, keep this in mind. Not only is that person asking you as the business owner, as the entrepreneur, as the CEO, that person is also Googling and searching for that answer online. So what you're simply doing is reverse engineering. You're figuring out exactly what your potential clients and your existing clients are asking. You're creating blog posts from that. And once you create those blog posts, when people search for that information, all of a sudden your blog posts will come up. So for example, I went to a networking group, and when I went to that networking group, I had created a blog post about like why I decided to resign from my position within that networking group. And immediately when I went there, I was talking about my blog and I was trying to get more people to interview for the podcast. And someone said at the end of the networking group that they read my blog. And the reason they read my blog, and as went over to her and I asked her, what did you type in to actually find my blog? And she typed in why I decided to stay with my networking group, or why I decided to leave my networking group, because I had 2 different blog posts related to that. And funny enough, again, these are ways in which you can try to create content, because and the reason that I wrote this is because while I was trying to determine whether or not I was going to stay or go, I myself searched for pros and cons for staying with that specific group. And I found some things, I found some other things. So I decided, because I enjoy creating content and enjoy writing, I decided to write something myself. So once I did that, that made and increased my visibility and provided more opportunity for me to potentially do more business with other people, maybe create a long-term relationship with somebody, or maybe be able to provide value to that person. So these are little things that you can do that, again, get you in that perspective of creating long-term results, not just immediate results, but long-term results, because there might be other people that are searching for that exact information. So that's one aspect of it, but also keep in mind that inherently built within every blog, there's also the opportunity to interact through comments. So that's also a really strong part of the blog that kind of differentiates it from, generally speaking, the pages of the website. Sometimes you can design a website with the comment section built in, but generally speaking, your blog is going to have an opportunity for people to interact. You're going to be able to interact with them on the blog, and that's going to, again, build that relationship and build those long-term results. So number 9, if you build it, they won't come. A lot of people think that once they create a blog post and they think it's the best blog post ever, they completely forget about the entire marketing aspect of it, of promoting, of sharing it out, of sending it to people. And there's a lot of different ways you can do that. Of course, you can share it via social media. You can send it through a newsletter. But the idea is that you're constantly creating that content. But if you just post it, everybody's not necessarily just going to come through the door. Same exact concept when you build a website, you cut on your quote unquote digital shingle and you think people are just going to drive into your website. That doesn't happen. That's what marketing is for. So if you build it, they won't come. But if you build it and promote it, they will. Keep that in mind, because a lot of people don't realize that. And a lot of people don't realize that when you create that blog post and then you search for that blog post on Google or any major search engine, it's not going to show up at the very top of the rankings of the search results. So keep that in mind, that it isn't instant. It's not like oatmeal or anything like that. It takes time in order for it to first of all be recognized, but it also takes time for the site, for you to be able to kind of share it out and for it to get some traction, so that it's seen as a noteworthy option for people to look for. So very, very important to kind of keep in mind. Number 10, frequency is king. And it's important because you want to make sure that you're creating more and more content. And when you're creating that content, people are going back to kind of see what it is that you're writing, see what it is that you're doing. And also, as I mentioned, it signals to the search engines, to the Google spiders, that you're creating content. But you want to make sure that you're doing it on a frequent basis, because when you start to build that frequency, you want to try to maintain it. And that is probably the biggest issue that people have with blogging, is the frequency, the consistency of creating the content on a regular basis. So what I usually recommend is that, hey, instead of creating 12 blog posts within the first week because you're just so excited to have a blog, maybe you plan out those 12 blog posts into one blog post a month and see if you can consistently do that. If you can consistently do that, then maybe you ramp it up. But see how consistent you can be with that. See how frequent you can be. Now, I'm going to give you some statistics to show you that, hey, you do want to try to do it as frequently as possible, but don't do frequency without consistency. Consistency, I think, is more important than frequency. You want to have a lot of blog posts. You want to have a lot of content, especially if you're just launching something. You want to have things in place, but don't undervalue the importance of consistency. All right. So what I wanted to do was just give you some interesting statistics. The reason that I wanted to tell you these interesting statistics is because it kind of drives home the fact of why I think blogging is so important and things you should, of course, try to keep in mind. So companies that publish 16 plus blog posts per month got almost 3.5 times more traffic than companies that posted between 0 and 4 monthly blog posts. So that's all about how frequently you post, how often you post. Keep that in mind. That is very, very important to do that. And that information is coming from HubSpot. And the next thing that you want to know is that companies that blogged 11 times per month had almost 3 times more traffic than those that blogged only 0 to 1 times per month. So what does that mean? Again, just the amount of times that you blog plays a really big part. But again, keep in mind that, I'm talking about consistency, but don't hold yourself to such a high standard, especially if you're doing it yourself, that you don't give yourself the opportunity to be able to be consistent, and you basically set yourself up to where you have 16 blog posts on launch day and you don't blog for the next 3 years. So that's not the goal either. So you just want to try to be consistent as well. But understand that the more frequently you put time and energy into it, the more likely you are going to be able to show impact and see results. So also keep in mind that B2C companies that blogged 11 times per month got more than 4 times as many leads as those that blogged only 4 to 5 times per month. Again, going back to the same exact concept. Last thing I want to leave you with is that companies that had published 401 blog posts in total got twice as much traffic as companies that had published 301 to 400 blog posts. So that basically puts it all in a nutshell. The more content you have out there, the more opportunity you're going to see, the more traffic you're going to get, the more that Google is going to see and recognize your site as a viable site, as a site that's not just a pet project, so to speak, but is creating serious content and information. So that is definitely the way that things are moving, and you want to make sure that you blog. As always, if there's anything I could do to help, please feel free to reach out to me. But this is Gresh signing out. Be sure, as always, to sign up for the You Are a Media Company course when it goes live at youaremedia.company. And be sure to check out the show notes. I have lots of resources related to blogging that you can check out there. But have a phenomenal rest of the day.